Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Cast your mind back, if you will, to 1994.
Hmm.
That transition to democracy in South Africa, it really captured the world's attention, didn't it?
Absolutely. It felt like a genuine political miracle.
So much hope, just immense global promise surrounding it.
Right. And tied right into that political freedom was this huge expectation of an economic boom.
Yeah, new dawn, widespread prosperity, that kind of thing.
That was definitely the feeling.
Hmm.
But today, our deep dive is into a specific report,
Okay.
one that takes a really hard look at what actually happened with that economic promise
Mhm.
over the last, 30 years now?
Wow, 30 years.
Yeah. So this source material gives us a pretty detailed analysis of South Africa's post-apartheid economic path.
So our mission today is basically to understand that journey using this report,
Exactly. We want to trace the trajectory using only what's in this report.
where things went well economically after 94. Right.
Where things maybe didn't go so well, and crucially, why the report suggests the economy hasn't quite lived up to those initial very high expectations.
Okay.
So we'll dig into the data presented, look at the institutions they built, the challenges the report highlights.
And what maybe could have been done differently, according to the source.
Precisely what the report suggests on that front.
All right, so the political side in 94 was, well, monumental. The sources definitely frame it that way,
Undeniable.
creating that massive expectation for the economy to follow suit. But you mentioned the report's main finding is quite pointed.
It is, yes. While the report definitely acknowledges significant gains were made, positive steps,
Sure.
its core assessment is that the overall economic path has been, and I'm quoting here, uneven and underwhelming.
Uneven and underwhelming.
Okay, and it specifically points to the period since roughly 2008
Right.
as culminating in what the report actually labels a lost decade.
A lost decade. Oof. That phrase alone makes you want to see the numbers. What does the report actually say about growth rates over these 3 decades?
Okay, so the report breaks down into phases.
Mm-hmm.
From 94 up to about 2007, growth was actually pretty decent, averaging around 3.5% GDP growth per year.
Right, that sounds more like the initial hope. What was driving that?
Well, the report links it to a global economic boom at the time, plus, the expected surge in investment after sanctions were lifted.
Makes sense. Then what?
Then came the period 2008 to 2013. Growth slowed quite a bit, down to about 2.0% on average.
Ah, the global financial crisis impact.
Exactly. The report points directly to that.
And after that, it didn't pick back up.
No, unfortunately. The next phase, 2014 to 2019, saw growth fall even further, averaging only about 1.0%.
Wow, just 1%. And the report connects that.
It explicitly links that slowdown to rising corruption scandals becoming public and the really escalating energy crisis, load-shedding woes.
Yeah, that started becoming a major story.
And then, most recently, the average from 2020 to 2023, well, it's been roughly 0.8%.
0.8%.
Yeah, reflecting COVID, obviously, but also a very weak recovery and just chronic, ongoing load shedding.
And the forecast for this year, 2024?
The report cites the IMF forecast, which is just 0.9%.
Okay, 0.9%. How does that stack up internationally, say, within Africa?
That's a key point the report makes. That 0.9% forecast, it's way below the average projected for sub-Saharan Africa.
Which is?
Closer to 3.8%, according to the source.
Right. So looking at those recent numbers, 0.8, 0.9%, the report considers that. Not good, I take it.
That's putting it mildly. The report's analysis is a very clear no.
Why specifically? What are the implications of such low growth, according to the report?
Well, first, and this is critical, it's below the country's own population growth rate,
Which is around?
about 1.3%. So you do the math. If the economy is growing slower than the population, then average income per person is actually going down, or stagnating at best. Exactly. That's a huge issue highlighted. And like we just said, it lags way behind comparable emerging markets. The report mentions, think, Vietnam, India, even Kenya.
Okay.
And, maybe most importantly, the report directly links this low growth to South Africa's persistently sky-high unemployment.
Right.
It calls it jobless or skewed growth, which then forces the question the report poses. If the economy is growing, even slowly, and unemployment stays this high, who's actually benefiting?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? Growth has to be inclusive. But, okay, the report isn't all doom and gloom. It does talk about some fundamental positives, right? Structures that were successfully built after 94.
Yes, it definitely gives credit where it's due for significant institution building.
Like what?
It highlights the South African Reserve Bank, the source, Meharmi, says it's remained independent and credible, which is vital.
Mm-hmm.
Strong legal foundations were established with the Constitution. The Bill of Rights are mentioned as cornerstones.
Right.
The Competition Commission also gets a nod for, actively curbing monopolies in different sectors.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so checks and balances.
And then there's the financial sector,
Yeah.
the JSE, the stock exchange insurance, mobile banking.
Mm.
The report describes it as advanced and even calls it a continental model.
A continental model. So quite strong then. That sounds like a pretty solid institutional base.
It does.
Did the report identify specific economic sectors that showed particular strength over this period?
Yes, it lists several sectoral strengths. Mining still key, obviously.
Platinum, gold.
Platinum, gold, manganese. South Africa is still a top global producer, the report confirms.
Okay.
Finance and telecoms are also noted as strong domestic sectors. The report actually mentions specific companies like MTN, Discovery, Capitec as examples.
Right. Big names.
And retail expansion is another success story it points to. Think of chains like ShopRite and Woolworths expanding across the continent.
So real areas of progress and strength, which makes the next part even more critical, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Despite this foundation, despite these strengths, the overall growth just stalled, leading to that lost decade. So this is where the report really digs into the why. What are the main factors it says drag down the economy?
It details a pretty complex mix of factors. Several major structural weaknesses that acted like anchors on growth.
Okay, what's first?
A huge one is what the report calls the unemployment and human capital crisis.
The unemployment numbers are stark. Official rate around.
It's around 33%, according to the source. But the report flags youth unemployment as just devastatingly high, over 60%.
60%. Unbelievable. What reasons does the report give for this?
It points to a few things.
Mm-hmm.
A major skills mismatch, which it links to, frankly, poor quality public schooling.
Okay.
Then there's the high cost and often apparently low economic return of getting a tertiary education.
Right.
Rigid labor laws are also mentioned, saying they discourage hiring, especially for smaller businesses, SMEs.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, the large informal sector, estimated at over 20% of GDP, which operates outside the formal system and lacks safety nets.
A whole constellation of issues just within employment. What
Yeah.
else?
Another absolutely critical drag factor identified is the energy and infrastructure breakdown.
PESCOM.
ESCOM is central, yes. The report details the collapse of the state power utility, linking it to mismanagement, corruption findings, and just an old, aging fleet of power stations.
And the cost of load shedding? Does it quantify that?
It does. It estimates the daily economic losses from these power cuts at between $40 and $70 million daily.
Wow. 40 to 70 million a day. That's staggering.
It is. And the report doesn't stop at energy. It also points to deteriorating logistics infrastructure.
Rail. Ports.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rail and ports, managed by Transnet, another state-owned company. Problems there ripple through the whole economy. And it also flags looming water shortages in key areas like Gauteng and the Eastern Cape.
So energy, logistics, even water. Foundational infrastructure under strain.
Serious strain. Then there's the issue of corruption and state capture.
Right. The report addresses this directly.
Very directly. It links this primarily to a specific period, President Zuma's time in office, roughly 2009 to 2018.
And the economic cost.
The report estimates the cost to the economy from state capture during that period at around $500 billion.
500 billion rand, what's that in dollars, roughly?
Roughly 27 billion US dollars. A massive figure.
How did this happen, according to the report?
It describes how key state institutions were systematically hollowed out. It names the Revenue Service, SARS,
Okay.
the National Prosecuting Authority, the MPA,
All right.
and various other state-owned enterprises, SOEs, basically weakening them from within.
And this had real consequences.
Absolutely. The report explicitly states these governance failures were a direct reason South Africa lost its investment-grade credit rating. It cites the S&P downgrade in 2017 as a result. It presents these as, documented findings of the damage.
Okay. A huge cost, institutionally and financially. What else does the report identify as a major weakness?
The final major area is termed policy paralysis and ideological confusion.
Meaning?
The report describes what it sees as an unclear policy mix, sort of trying to balance socialist ideals with capitalist practices, leading to uncertainty.
Okay. Any specific policies mentioned?
Yes.
Okay.
Regarding Black economic empowerment, or BE, the report's analysis, again, presenting its finding, is that it ended up creating elite capture, not broad empowerment for the majority.
So benefiting a few rather than the many.
That's the report's assessment. The unresolved land reform issue is another point.
Right.
Specifically, the report mentions that threats of expropriation without compensation created significant uncertainty for investors.
It's investment uncertainty. Okay.
Labor market rigidity comes up again, too. The report states that powerful unions, giving COSATU as an example,
The big trade union federation.
right, that they block reforms needed for flexibility and growth. The report presents these as key policy-level blockages.
Wow. That is quite a list. Unemployment, infrastructure, corruption, policy uncertainty. It really sounds like, from the report's viewpoint, problems with people, power, politics, and policy all got tangled up.
Deeply intertwined is the sense you get from the report, yes. And it doesn't stop there. It also looks at external factors and internal social issues.
How do those fit into the picture?
Well, the report discusses geopolitics and immigration dynamics.
Emigration, people leaving.
Yes, it highlights a significant trend. It says over 1.1 million South Africans have left since 1994.
1.1 million. Where are they going?
Primarily places like the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. And the report notes this includes a high number of skilled professionals.
Ah, the brain drain. What reasons does the source give? The push factors.
The report lists several.
Yeah.
Rising crime levels, a perceived decline in the quality of public education and healthcare, general economic pessimism, and, of course, chronic load shedding.
And the impact of this brain drain.
According to the report, it worsens the existing skills gap and ultimately lowers productivity for the whole economy.
Okay. And geopolitics part.
The report contrasts the early post-apartheid era, the Mandela years, which brought global celebration, with the current situation. It notes South Africa's neutral stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict has, reportedly, strained ties with traditional Western partners.
But strengthened ties elsewhere.
Yes, strengthened ties with China and Russia, particularly through the BRICS group.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Right. But the report's overall assessment on this front is that South Africa is now increasingly seen as punching below its geopolitical weight.
Interesting framing. Okay, what about the internal social fault lines?
This section deals with crime, social fragility, and inequality, and the picture painted by the report is stark.
The crime stats?
Yeah, it provides figures from 2023-24, around 27,000 homicides.
Which is a rate of?
About 41 per 100,000 people. Very high globally. Over 53,000 reported sexual offenses, more than 150,000 robberies involving violence, around 22,000 carjackings.
Grim numbers. What contributors does the report mention?
High youth unemployment is listed first. Poor policing, leading to low conviction rates, pervasive social inequality, substance abuse, a combination of factors.
And the inequality itself.
The report confirms South Africa remains the world's most unequal country, measured by the Gini coefficient.
Still the most unequal.
Yes, with the top 10% controlling over 80% of the wealth, according to the source. And it makes a disturbing point.
What's that?
That the physical layout of townships and informal settlements still largely mirrors the geography of apartheid-era segregation.
Wow. So inequality is literally mapped onto the landscape still?
That's the implication in the report. Deep-seated, persistent inequality.
These social issues, the crime, the inequality, plus the external factors like emigration. It feels like they just pile onto the economic problems, doesn't it?
They absolutely compound them. According to the report's analysis, it paints a picture of really deep-seated challenges.
But importantly, the report doesn't just list problems. You mentioned it looks at the path not taken.
It does. It's quite direct about what it terms missed opportunities and outlines potential alternative strategies for key areas.
Okay, let's go through some of those. What about education?
The report suggests the focus was too much on just access, getting kids into schools, rather than the quality of the education. The proposed alternative: serious investment in teacher training, STEM subjects, and also TVET colleges, technical and vocational training.
Makes sense. What about the Eskom crisis?
Missed opportunities there, according to the report, included politically motivated appointments and dragging feet on renewable energy.
And the alternative strategy proposed?
Unbundle the utility, break it up, and encourage private power producers, IPPs, much earlier and more aggressively.
Okay. Corruption, state capture.
The missed opportunity was weak oversight of the state-owned enterprises. The report suggests an independent prosecuting authority should have been established much, much sooner.
Right, land reform. That's always contentious.
The report characterizes the path taken as politicized and often leading to unproductive redistribution.
And the alternative suggested in the source?
A market-based approach, linking land redistribution to skills development and support.
Interesting. The labor market.
The report sees overprotection and inflexibility as missed opportunities to boost jobs.
So the alternative.
Policies specifically designed to support small and medium businesses, plus things like youth apprenticeships.
What about that emigration point, the brain drain?
The missed opportunity, according to the report, was basically ignoring the potential of the South African diaspora.
So what could have been done?
It suggests ideas like diaspora investment bonds, trying to attract investment back and actively reaching out globally to tap into South African skills abroad.
And finally, crime control.
The report views the approach as too reactive.
Chasing crime after it happened.
Pretty much. The alternative proposed is a shift towards intelligence-led policing, trying to anticipate and prevent crime combined with focused urban renewal projects.
What's really striking listening to this is it sounds like the report is saying the answers weren't necessarily unknown.
That's a critical point the report makes, almost explicitly. It says something like, the right policies were known, but not implemented consistently or equitably.
Known, but not implemented. That suggests a failure of what? Will, execution.
The report points strongly towards a failure of consistent political will and, crucially, equitable execution across the board.
So given this really challenging picture the report paints, where does it leave things looking ahead? Is there potential to turn the tide? What's the future outlook?
The report does conclude by looking forward, yeah. It examines the outlook and flags potential turning points, framing things often as both risks and opportunities.
Okay. What's the growth outlook itself? Still low.
Still modest, yeah, around 1.5% projected, which is still below the regional average. But the report does see potential upside if meaningful reforms are pursued. Things like investing in green energy, leveraging BRICS, plus investment opportunities.
And the recent 2024 election, how does the report view that?
It flags the outcome as a major variable. The big risk mentioned is potential political instability if the ANC loses its majority and complex coalition governments emerge.
But there's an opportunity side, too.
Yes. The potential opportunity identified is for new political accountability to emerge from that shakeup.
What about South Africa's demographics? That huge youth population.
That's presented as a major fork in the road. A huge risk if they remain largely unemployed. Potential for mass social unrest is mentioned.
But the flip side.
The opportunity is that this young population could become a powerful engine of innovation and consumption if they can be brought into the economy.
Right. Any other big opportunities?
The global green economy transition is highlighted. Given South Africa's mineral resources, rare earths, platinum, vital for green tech, the report suggests an opportunity for the country to position itself to lead the African decarbonization pathway.
So potential is definitely still there, according to the report, but it sounds heavily dependent on actually seizing these specific chances and managing the risk.
That's exactly the nuanced picture the report leaves you with. It's conditional.
Which brings us towards the end. How does the report ultimately summarize this whole 30-year economic story since apartheid ended?
Its final assessment, as termed in the source, is pretty blunt. Political freedom, achieved undeniably, but economic freedom, still unequal and stagnant.
Unequal and stagnant.
And overall growth is characterized as having been consistently below potential.
So what's the prescription? What does the report propose as the essential way forward from here?
The source really boils it down to 3 core actions needed. 1, decentralize energy. Get away from the total reliance on Eskom.
Okay. 2.
Invest significantly in people. Address that human capital crisis, education, skills.
Right. And 3?
Professionalize governance. That means seriously combating corruption and improving the state's actual capacity to deliver.
Yeah.
And implicitly, rebuilding trust is woven through that.
Decentralize energy, invest in people, professionalize governance.
Those are the pillars the report emphasizes. Its ultimate conclusion is that only by really committing to these fundamental changes can South Africa hope to, and this is a final quote, re-emerge as a regional powerhouse and global symbol of inclusive progress.
We've covered a lot of ground here, taking a deep dive into this specific report. And it paints, well, a complex, often quite sobering picture of South Africa's economy since 1994, doesn't it?
It really does.
A story that starts with incredible hope, sees real structural strengths put in place.
Absolutely important foundations.
But then hits this long period, a decade or more, of stagnation, held back, according to the report, by these deep weaknesses: infrastructure, governance, skills, policy issues.
All compounded by serious social challenges and opportunities that were missed along the way.
Yeah. And understanding this analysis, it really does shed light on the immense challenges many developing nations face, trying to turn political freedom into prosperity for everyone.
It absolutely underscores how vital things like good governance, consistent policy, developing human capital, and just strong, reliable institutions are for that translation to happen. They're all interconnected.
So here's a final thought, drawing directly from that contrast the report highlights. You've got the current reality described stagnant, unequal growth, and then you have the report's vision of what could have been done differently. Given that stark difference, what level of political will, or perhaps even a broader societal shift, do you, listening now, think would actually be needed for South Africa to finally bridge that gap and fulfill what the report calls its unfinished economic promise?
Something definitely worth reflecting on after hearing the details laid out in this report.